A boy of 6 sleeps in a nursery in the Red Keep. His mother sits with him. 2 men step from the shadows. A former gold cloak and a rat catcher who knows every tunnel beneath the castle. By morning, the boy's head is gone. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Mysteries of the Realm. Episode 6. Every Child of Helaena. None of their deaths add up. Helaena Targaryen was a queen who wanted nothing from the Iron Throne. She liked insects. She rode a dragon named Dreamfyre. She bore 3 children with her brother husband Aegon II, the twins Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, and young Maelor. Every one of those children died before the war was over. Helaena died too. Not one of them fell in battle. Not one was given a trial. And not one of their deaths is told the same way twice. Because Fire and Blood does not give us a single, reliable account. It gives us 3 narrators, and all 3 had reasons to shape what they told us. Mushroom, a court fool who claims he witnessed events he almost certainly did not attend. His memoirs are salacious, vivid, and suspiciously dramatic. He places himself at the center of every horror. Septon Eustace, a pious man loyal to the Greens. His account sanctifies their suffering and condemns the blacks at every turn. Grand Maester Munkun, the most clinical of the 3. He compiled his history from the confessions of Grand Maester Orwyle, a man who wrote to save his own life after switching sides. None of them were objective. Most of the time, none of them were even present. And yet, these are the only voices that speak for Helaena's children. The children themselves left no words, no letters, no testimony. They are known only through the agendas of the men who survived them. That is what we are here to investigate. Not the history, the historians. We begin where the war became unforgivable. Late in the year 129, Prince Lucerys Velaryon, a boy of 14, was killed by Aemond Targaryen on Dragonback over Shipbreaker Bay. Aemond Targaryen's response was swift and terrible. He wanted a son for a son. He sent word to Mysaria, the White Worm. She arranged 2 men. Blood, a former sergeant in the City Watch, and Cheese, a rat catcher who knew the tunnels beneath the Red Keep. They entered under cover of darkness, found Helaena in her chambers with her children, and murdered Prince Jaehaerys. Those are the facts that all 3 narrators agree upon. A 6-year-old boy was decapitated. His head was taken. His mother was left holding what remained. Everything else, every word of dialogue, every detail of the scene, comes from men who were not in that room. Mushroom's version is the one that has calcified into accepted truth. He says blood and cheese forced Helaena to choose which son would die. She resisted. She offered her own life. They insisted it must be a boy. In desperation, she named Maelor, the youngest, perhaps because he would not understand. Cheese then whispered to Maelor, "You hear that, little boy? Your mama wants you dead." And they killed Jaehaerys instead. It is the most devastating version. It is also the most suspicious. Mushroom claims he was there, hiding, watching, doing nothing while a child was butchered. If that is true, then a court fool witnessed murder and stayed silent. If it is false, and it is almost certainly false, then the most detailed account of blood and cheese was written by a man reconstructing the scene from rumor, gossip, and his own talent for horror. Septon Eustace tells it differently. In his account, there is no forced choice. Blood and cheese simply kill the boy. No theatrical cruelty. Eustace was a green partisan, and curiously, His version removes the detail that makes Helaena's ordeal most unbearable. The choice. Why? Perhaps because the choice narrative transforms Helaena from a passive victim into an unwilling participant in her own son's death. Perhaps because that version served a different agenda than his. Munkun draws from Orwyle, who wrote his account under duress. The broad shape matches Mushroom's version. The demand, the choice, the wrong child killed. But Orwyle was in prison when he wrote it. A man writing to save his life does not write what happened. He writes what his captors want to hear. So we are left with a question that has no clean answer. Was Helaena forced to choose? Or did three narrators, none of whom were present, construct the most dramatic version of events because dramatic stories survive? Here is what should trouble us most. We treat the choice as fact. Every retelling includes it. But stop and consider who was in that room. Two killers, a mother, and her children. Blood was caught, tortured, and executed. But tortured confessions are not testimony. The children were too young to give a coherent account. Helaena never spoke of it clearly again. The choice is either the most horrifying moment in the entire Dance of the Dragons, or it was invented by men who understood that the most devastating version is the one people remember. A 6-year-old boy was decapitated in his mother's arms. That fact requires no embellishment. Everything beyond it is a story told by men who arrived after the blood had dried. Maelor was the child Helaena may have named. He survived that night. He would not survive long. After Rhaenyra took King's Landing, Green loyalists smuggled the surviving children out of the capital. Jaehaera was sent one way. Maelor was entrusted to Sir Rickard Thorne of the Kingsguard, heading south toward Old Town, the seat of Hightower power, the strongest green stronghold remaining. If Maelor reached Old Town, he would be safe. More than that, he would be a living claim to the throne, a rallying point for the green cause. He never arrived. He died at Bitterbridge. The accounts fracture again. Munkun says the mob at Bitterbridge tore the boy apart, each person pulling at the child, and in the frenzy, his body came apart. A 2-year-old, dismembered by a crowd. Eustace tells it with less horror, but the same result. Chaos, violence, a child lost in it. Mushroom, who was nowhere near Bitterbridge, offers the most graphic version, as Mushroom always does. But step back from the details and ask a different question. Not how Maelor died, but who benefits from the manner of his death. A toddler was being escorted through contested territory toward the enemy's strongest fortress. He was a living succession claim. If he reached Old Town, the Greens would have a prince to crown should Aegon II fall. The Black faction had every reason to ensure that Prince never arrived. And Bitterbridge was in the reach, a region where loyalties were divided, where agents moved freely, where a crowd could be incited and blame could be buried in the chaos. Was it a random mob? Perhaps. Crowds in wartime have done worse for less reason. Sir Rickard Thorne was a single knight guarding a child. That is insufficient protection for a journey through a war zone. The simplest explanation is that the people who sent a 2-year-old into hostile territory with inadequate protection are the ones responsible for his death, not through conspiracy, but through negligence dressed as duty. But the timing is troubling. The one green prince being smuggled to the strongest green stronghold in the realm died before he arrived. That is either misfortune or tradecraft. And in this war, misfortune and tradecraft look remarkably alike. A toddler does not understand succession. He does not know why strangers are pulling at his arms. The men who wrote about his death years later were not there, but they understood succession perfectly. And here is the cruelty that binds these first two deaths together. Maelor was the child Helaena may have named, the one she chose to sacrifice, if the choice ever happened at all. Blood and cheese killed the other son instead. And then Maelor died anyway. Her choice, if it was real, was meaningless. Both sons were taken. The only thing left was the guilt. Some have asked what finally broke Helaena. It was not blood and cheese alone. It was not captivity alone. It was learning that the son she named, the son whose life was supposed to be the price of the others, died screaming in a town she had never seen, in the arms of strangers who did not know his name. That is what the narrators agree upon. After Maelor's death, whatever remained of Helaena collapsed entirely. She stopped eating. She stopped speaking. She stopped looking at her remaining daughter. The Maesters call this madness. But what does madness actually mean in this context? She stopped speaking. She stopped eating. She stared at nothing. These are not the symptoms of the famous Targaryen madness. The coin flip, the fire in the blood, the cruelty of Maegor, or the paranoia of Aerys. These are the symptoms of a woman who watched her son's head sawed off, was told her other son was torn apart by a mob, and was then imprisoned by the faction she believed responsible. Or they are the symptoms of sedation. Milk of the poppy was available in every castle in Westeros. Sweet sleep was known. A grief-stricken queen who might scream accusations, who might rally sympathy from the small folk, who might say dangerous things about how her children died. That queen is a problem. A queen who sits quietly, eats nothing, stares at walls. That queen has been managed. Her madness looks, from a certain angle, remarkably like a woman being kept docile. The Maesters diagnosed her, but a diagnosis can also be a label, and labels can hide what no one wants examined. Helaena Targaryen died by falling from a window in Maegor's holdfast, impaled on the iron spikes of the dry moat below. The simplest version, she jumped. A woman broken beyond repair, who had lost both sons and could not bear to live in a world that had taken everything from her. This is what Munkun records. This is what Septon Eustace reports. Though Eustace adds that Mysaria told Helaena about Maelor's death that very night, implying Mysaria pushed her toward the edge, if not over it. Mushroom says it was murder. He accuses Mysaria of orchestrating the killing. In other accounts, Eustace points the finger at Ser Luther Largent, a gold cloak commander loyal to Rhaenyra, who was guarding Maegor's holdfast that night. Whether the hand that pushed was Largent's, or Mysaria's agent, or no hand at all, the narrators cannot agree. 2 of our 3 sources say suicide, and 2 of 3 should be enough to close the case. But here is what neither of them explains. Helaena was a prisoner, the most valuable political prisoner Rhaenyra held, a queen consort, a symbol the small folk loved. She was confined to Maegor's holdfast, which was built as a fortress within a fortress. Its entire design was containment. How did she reach an unguarded window? Whether she jumped or was pushed, someone was either negligent or complicit. A prisoner does not wander to an open window in the most secure building in King's Landing without someone allowing it. Either the guards failed, which, for the most important prisoner in the realm, is difficult to accept as accident, or someone ensured the window was available. The question is not only whether Helaena jumped or was thrown. The question is who left the window open. And here is what happened after. The small folk of King's Landing erupted. They had loved Helaena. They blamed Rhaenyra. The riots that followed contributed directly to the storming of the Dragon Pit, which drove Rhaenyra from the capital and ultimately ended her reign. If Rhaenyra ordered Helaena's death, she ordered her own destruction. That is not the calculation of a political survivor. Rhaenyra was many things, but she was not fool enough to hand her enemies a martyr, which raises the most uncomfortable possibility of all. If Rhaenyra did not order it, and Helaena did not jump, then someone else killed a queen and let Rhaenyra take the blame. Someone who understood that a dead Helaena would do more damage to Rhaenyra than a living one ever could. And then there is Dreamfyre. When Helaena died, her dragon, chained in the dragon pit on Rhaenys' hill across the city from Maegor's holdfast, went berserk. She snapped 2 of her chains. She thrashed against her bonds. She screamed. The dragon pit is not beside the Red Keep. It is across King's Landing. Dreamfyre could not have seen what happened. She could not have heard the fall. And yet, at the moment Helaena hit the spikes, her dragon knew. The Maesters will tell you this is coincidence. The Maesters also told you Helaena jumped. Dreamfyre never flew again after that night. She died weeks later in the storming of the Dragon Pit, killed by the same small folk who had rioted for the queen she was bonded to. The dragon who screamed when her rider died was torn apart by the crowd that claimed to mourn that rider. Even the dragon could not grieve in peace. 3 years passed. The war ended. Aegon II was poisoned. Rhaenyra's son, Aegon III, a boy of 11, was crowned king. And in an attempt to heal the wounds of the dance, the new regime married him to the last surviving child of Helaena and Aegon II, Jaehaera Targaryen. She was the twin who lived when Jaehaerys was killed. She had been in the room. She had seen blood and cheese. She had survived the war that killed her mother, both brothers, her father, and nearly every member of her family. She was 10 years old. She was queen. The war was over. She fell from a window in Maegor's holdfast and was impaled on the iron spikes below. The same tower, the same spikes, the same method. 3 years after her mother. The official account says suicide, a deeply traumatized child following her mother's path, and that explanation is not impossible. Jaehaera had endured horrors that would destroy anyone. She was withdrawn, silent, unable to connect with the husband she had been given or the court that surrounded her. Children can break. That is a truth no one wants to speak, but it is a truth. And yet, she was 10. She did not speak in council. She did not rally lords. She did not write letters to Old Town or plot with green loyalists. She sat in silence and stared at walls. If that is what threatens a regime, then the regime was never secure to begin with. But Jaehaera's death was convenient for someone. Lord Unwin Peake, regent, hand, and the most ambitious man in Westeros, wanted his own candidate beside the king. For that to happen, the current queen had to go. And on the night Jaehaera died, the Kingsguard knight standing outside her door was Sir Mervyn Flowers, a bastard of House Peake, Unwin Peake's own kinsman. The man with the clearest motive in the 7 kingdoms had his own blood guarding the door. That is not proof. It is not even an accusation. No narrator makes the charge directly with evidence that would hold. Peake had motive. Flowers had opportunity. But motive and opportunity are not confession. They are the ingredients of suspicion, and suspicion is all the historical record provides. And there is a counter-argument worth hearing. If Peake orchestrated Jaehaera's death to install his own candidate, the plan failed. Aegon III chose Daenerys Velaryon as his new bride, not Peake's daughter. If this was Peake's grand design, it produced nothing but a dead child and a political setback. That is either proof of innocence or proof that even calculated men sometimes miscalculate. But the pattern remains. Mother and daughter, same tower, same spikes, same verdict of suicide, 3 years apart. And now we must do the hardest part of any investigation. We must stop looking at the deaths and start looking at the narrators. Pull the lens back. 4 deaths. 3 voices telling us what happened. None of them neutral. Mushroom benefits from drama. His memoirs circulated because they were shocking, salacious, and vivid. A court fool does not sell copies by writing that events were ambiguous and unclear. He sells copies by putting himself in the room, by adding the most horrifying detail, by making every scene a spectacle. His account of Blood and Cheese is the one we remember because it is the most unbearable. That should tell us something about Mushroom and about ourselves. Septon Eustace benefits from green sympathy. Every death in his account is framed to maximize the suffering of Helaena's family and the guilt of the Black faction. Every victim is saintly. Every perpetrator is monstrous. His Helaena is a wholly innocent, which may be partly true, but holiness is also a narrative device. A holy victim generates more outrage than a complicated one. Munkun compiled his history from Orwyle, a man who served both sides and wrote his account while a prisoner, knowing his life depended on what he put on parchment. Orwyle's confessions are the foundation of the official record, and they were written by a man who was not trying to record history. He was trying to survive. 3 narrators, 3 agendas, and somewhere beneath the layers of embellishment, sanctification, and self-preservation, 4 people who actually died. The children of Helaena had no chronicler. No one wrote from their perspective. No one asked what Jaehaerys thought in his last moments, or whether Maelor cried, or what Jaehaera saw when she looked out that window. They exist in the historical record only as instruments of revenge, of grief, of political convenience. They were not instruments, they were children, and the men who wrote about them never once forgot that they were useful, and never once remembered that they were young. So what do I believe? I believe Blood and Cheese happened in a room where no trustworthy witness survived. I believe the choice may be real, or it may be the kind of detail that chroniclers invent, because the truth, a child was simply killed, is not dramatic enough for the page. I believe the horror does not require embellishment, and that embellishment should make us cautious. I believe Maelor died because adults moved him across a war zone like a chess piece and called it protection. Whether the mob was incited or spontaneous changes, nothing for a 2-year-old who did not understand why he was being carried through a world on fire. I believe Helaena's death is the one that should trouble us most. Not because we can solve it, we cannot, but because the question of who left the window open has never been answered, and no narrator has ever thought to ask it. Suicide is a story that closes the case. Murder is a story that opens one. And the people who wrote the histories had every reason to prefer the version that required no further questions. I believe Jaehaera was 10 years old, and that 10-year-old queens do not threaten anyone. I believe Mervyn Flowers was at her door, and Unwin Peake was in his chambers, and that some coincidences are not coincidences. But I also believe that a traumatized child in an impossible world might have seen no way forward, and that both explanations can exist in the same silence. And I believe this: when Dreamfyre screamed in her chains across the city, she was not reacting to a report or a rumor. The bond between dragon and rider does not lie. Something reached across King's Landing that night, something the Maesters have no framework to explain. The dragon knew what happened to Helaena. The question is whether we ever will. Was it grief that killed them? Or was it policy? I do not think even George R.R. Martin wants us to answer that. I think he wants us to sit with it, to feel the weight of 4 deaths that will never be resolved, to understand that in this world, and perhaps in ours, the children who die in wars between powerful men are remembered only in the words of men who had reasons to lie. The truth fell from a tower, and no one caught it. So tell me this, which of Helaena's children haunts you most? And which narrator do you trust least? Write it in the comments. I read every theory. And if you want to be here when we unravel the next mystery, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter.